if we could now move to the next report, which is around antisocial behaviour. And again, I think this is an update around the latest information around incidents of antisocial behaviour and the work that West Yorkshire Police with partners are undertaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the report that you've got, Commissioner, talks about, it considers how we deal with antisocial behaviour across West Yorkshire, but also how we use ASVAT, which is the Antisocial Behaviour Analysis Tool, across West Yorkshire. It looks at demand coming through and, really importantly, repeat incidents of antisocial behaviour, where we are identifying risk and vulnerabilities out in the community. It is a timely review of how we deal with antisocial behaviour, because we have seen some large reductions of antisocial behaviour, which I'll touch on in a little moment. But also, what the report does highlight is that the 5 districts, because they work slightly differently, again in the 5 partnership hubs, are recording antisocial behaviour a little bit differently. So it's a good opportunity for us to review, and I've got Rachel Banks reviewing how they use the ASVAT tool moving forward, because a while ago, a number of years ago, all 5 districts were using the ASVAT tool, the system, exactly the same, but over time they've got more effective and streamlined ways of working with the partners, and therefore they've moved away from it a little bit. So it is a good opportunity, because there may be a golden nugget out there in one district which actually we could then use for all 5. Yeah. So the report talks about incidents that come in, how they are given a red, amber or green risk element to them, and then what happens with the red and the amber incidents. You might have a question later around the green incidents and what happens there. But in relation to the red and the amber cases that come in, they've identified a link officer, which to me is a single point of contact, a SPOC. So therefore they're not going back to different members of staff all the time when these incidents go on. There's an occurrence is recorded, and then the local neighbourhood officers, the ward officers and the PCSOs in that area, with the support of their sergeants or inspectors, deal with that incident in partnership out on the ground. As I said earlier, the officers that work in the antisocial behaviour teams are often co-located. Certainly at Calderdale they are co-located in one office, and they agree when the incident comes in who's best placed to deal with it. Just looking at the actual figures then that are in the report, it talks about some reductions of antisocial behaviour incidents across the force, in particular Wakefield and Leeds. Wakefield have had a reduction of 27% and Leeds 25% reduction, and Calderdale has had the smallest reduction of just under 5%. But when you compare the first 5 months of this year, it's really important we compare the same months of the year to the year before, because we have peaks and troughs in school holidays and in the summer months and around bonfire time that we're in at the moment with antisocial behaviour. But when you compare the first 5 months of this year, so April through to August, compared to last year, there is an 18% reduction of antisocial behaviour. But what the report doesn't tell you, but it is important, is that there's actually been an increase of about the same amount, about 18% of criminal damage offences. And that is because of our drive to record crime ethically. So whilst we've seen a reduction in one, it's actually recorded differently in criminal damage offences as opposed to antisocial behaviour incidents. And that's in the report. And it also talks about that repeat incidents, which are really key to this, have reduced slightly by 1%. Just moving through the report then, and it does talk about perception of ASB has worsened, but only slightly, but in particular to rubbish or litter. And obviously we're working with the local authorities and the councils around that particular issue of rubbish and litter. Just looking at the relatively new legislation then that came in about a year ago, which streamlined our powers to be able to deal with antisocial behaviour. The criminal behaviour order can include a positive requirement to address the underlying causes out in the communities. There has been some confusion, it would be true to say, about the community trigger and how a community trigger is activated. And a community trigger is where a member of the public who is subject to antisocial behaviour can ask for a review, effectively, of what's gone on if they're not happy. But the elements of how you identify the trigger are quite complicated. They're in the report, but the one occasion is 3 qualifying complaints, another qualifying is 5 times in the last 6 months, and the third one is 1 incident, but it's driven by hate crime. The community, and I've raised it at the Force IAG, find that all quite confusing about when a community trigger can be activated. So we need to work through that and educate people moving forward. And then in your report, you've just got the breakdown of the various areas, which are the Leeds and the Wakefield I've just spoken about. And then the final page of the report you've got is the one that links you into the rubbish or litter. Just one point I just want to make reference to on the final page of the report is around the worsening position, and only slightly, but it is worsening all the same in relation to ease of contact. And whilst I've not had a piece of work done on that, I actually feel that might be linked to our 101 number, which whilst we are outperforming many other forces in relation to our 101 performance, a single non-emergency number in our comms section, I believe that link is back to that, because people would tend to use the 101, the single non-emergency number, to report this type of incident. And that's the content of the report, but I'm sure you have some questions in relation to it.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And first to say, I mean, overall, you know, the reductions are good news.
Yes.
Significant reductions in most of the districts. And, you know, I think that's a testament really to work of both the police and our partners, because this is very much a partnership approach around tackling antisocial behaviour. So I just want to say that from the outset. In terms of some of the questions, and yes, so again, you've touched on some of the differences in each of the partnerships, but is it the case that all ASB incidents will be dealt with by a partnership hub or approach in each of the districts?
They would all incidents would go through to the hub, and the hub would be able to see all incidents. But what would tend to happen, if it was a member of the public who was not vulnerable and it was the first incident, so it was given a green on the risk matrix, it would probably be the local PCSO that would speak to the member of the public. It's the more vulnerable cases that will go through to the hub for some action afterwards. But the hub is able to see the full picture on the computer database, which then allows them to see a pattern emerging. Yeah. And when I say the hubs as well, the housing play a huge part in this, because often they are really based around housing issues out in the community as opposed to police or local authority.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for that. And again, I've visited all of these hubs and seen the real joint work that goes on. So you probably started to answer the next question around, given that a lot of these cases are risked as green,
yes,
but that, you know, the fact that they're on the register in the first place, it means that they have to be dealt with in some way. So can you just give us some examples of how the majority of those are?
Yes, a green risk incident would be one where it's not a vulnerable member of the public. So somebody like me who's had a one-off incident, I'm not vulnerable, I've reported it rightly to the police, and I'd like a follow-up visit from say a PCSO. I don't live in a antisocial behaviour hotspot area. There's not a lot of incidents happening around me, like on a particular estate. So whilst I would get a level of service and the hub would be able to see my report, I wouldn't get a single point of contact officer. I would get a follow-up if I needed it, but I probably wouldn't get referred to an external agency or a housing association or anything like that. But clearly if it escalated, then there would be that option. And if I had a number of incidents like that and I felt that I'd slipped through the net, then obviously I could pull in the community trigger and say, I've had, 5 incidents in the last 6 months, what's happening please? Which is what the legislation's there for. Yeah,
and I agree with you actually with the comments around the community trigger. My personal view was at the time when the legislation was introduced that it sort of went way over the top in terms of trying to make clear to the public what their expectations might be in an instance of antisocial behaviour. And to be fair, I think I know here in West Yorkshire with our partners we've adopted probably a much higher threshold anyway than what it sets out in the community trigger. So it's more of a comment than a question.
Yes. We've only had 5 community triggers over the last 12 months because I think, education-wise, the public don't understand it. It is confusing. We have tried to let them know about it, but it is difficult. But the reassurance I take from that is that hate crime is dealt with very, very proactively in West Yorkshire. And you'll recall I said only 1 hate incident can allow a community trigger. None of the ones, the 5 community triggers we've had have been hate incidents because a member of the public has been happy with how we've dealt with that hate incident. Yeah. And I take some reassurance from that. Yeah,
and personally, I think that's how I would want things to be dealt with anyway, because if one instance of antisocial behaviour, if it's so upsetting and alarming to a member of the public, then we shouldn't be waiting for 4 other offences to be committed, because we all know of the tragic Fiona Pilkington case, which was a sea change in dealing with antisocial behaviour within England and Wales as well. So yeah, it's good to hear that reassurance. Again, you've touched on a slight drop in the satisfaction rates around ease of contact from some of the service users. And given that we have now got actually quite a few other ways of the public being able to contact West Yorkshire Police through the website, the live chat, email, are these things being factored in to that sort of analysis around the surveys and the reasons that may lay behind the drop in the satisfaction rates? Yes,
we do believe that the drop in satisfaction rates are connected to our 101 number, and that's around education, to say that actually if you don't want to use 101 you can contact us online. When I've done a little bit of work with Tom Donohoe, who's our manager at our customer contact centre, he talks about, and he's done a dip sample of some of the calls, he talks about that actually that members of the public experience antisocial behaviour, want to talk to somebody, and sometimes they are maybe some of our older community who might not immediately jump to an iPhone. So we do understand that, but there's clearly further work we need to do to make sure it doesn't drop any further.
Okay.
To be fair to the context of it, it's 90% satisfaction with ease of contact. And it's gone from 91.9 to 90, so I think we're still in a very healthy place, but it's something we're just still watching.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to probe that because I agree with you actually, and I think a lot of this is related to the 101 and some of the issues there have been, let's be honest with that. And I know the staff work incredibly hard around the number of calls and the complexity sometimes of some of the calls that come in, and again some of the budget pressures have contributed to the movement of staff, so I absolutely understand all that, and I know that there's a lot of hard work has been put in place to try and turn that around, but clearly it's something we need to keep under review. Just moving on to some of the figures then, so any particular reasons why you think Leeds and Wakefield have seen the biggest reductions of around 24% and 27% respectively?
Well, it does play out, as I said earlier, in relation to the criminal damage offences, because whilst we look at 18% as a fourth, when you do look at Wakefield and Leeds, and they have had the largest decreases, their damage has gone up by a similar amount. So we believe it to be that sort of read across there. When you look at the Calderdale one though, Calderdale had some huge reductions last year and the year before, so it's actually a really low level now in any event, but we believe it to be the criminal damage links across.
Okay. And yeah, we know Calderdale is the smallest district out of the 5.
Yes.
And there has been according to the figures, a 2.3% increase in the repeat location rate, while the other districts have seen a reduction.
Yes.
Is there any particular reasoning behind that? Or?
Well, I think when you look at Calderdale's levels, I think they're only about 8 or 9%, so it's actually penny numbers. So whilst it might be a 2% increase, it will be a handful of cases.
Right. Okay. But those, in terms of the numbers, then I assume that those particular instances will be targeted and tried to find out why. Because
they are repeat, they would be naturally a red or an amber, depending on the person's level of vulnerability. So if it was me and I was a repeat victim, I'd probably be an amber, but if it was my elderly mother, it'd probably be a red.
Yeah. Okay.
For our policing response with the partnership.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me that rubbish and litter tend to be the biggest things around antisocial behaviour, because certainly from the surveys that we carry out, the thousands of responses we get back, it's always up there as one of the top issues. Is it across the board, or is it concentrated in any particular areas?
I think it's across the board. So we can't just say, well, it's one particular council area who is not picking up litter, etc. It's generally across the board when you look at the data that's being supplied.
I mean, dare I say, Commissioner, of all the survey points, I suppose only 2 people in every 10 think that drunken and rowdy behaviour is getting worse. Only 2 people think that teenagers hanging around. 3 people out of every 10 think that drugs is a problem, and it's 4 out of 10 for litter. Yeah. So of all of the ones for us in the spectrum of antisocial behaviour, it's the one we work on with the partnership, where they've got the primacy for, but it is an indicator of other things going on in society, and other agencies' cuts as well, isn't it, I suspect? Yeah, and I think it just highlights the need for that real partnership working at the local level, because, yes, strictly speaking, rubbish, litter, environment issues are, things primarily for the local authority. That clearly, if things are left to get too much out of hand, it contributes to that people feeling unsafe, and then that feeds into crime and criminality and antisocial behaviour. So it's in all our interests to work together to combat those issues at the local level. Okay, I think I've exhausted the questions on that, so thank you for that report.